Wish there was something going on. I mean, I wish we could find something to talk about. I wish there was something out there that might be of interest to fantasy managers so we could have a discussion about it. I don't know, like maybe an NFL draft. Oh, wait, there is one of those. Hey, everybody. How's it going? Hey, Brian. Hey, Andrea. Thanks for coming. Should be an exciting stream today. Ready for your questions. We'll give people a chance to show up before I start getting too jiggy with it here. Hope you've all enjoyed the draft so far. Comments, please. If anything the special strikes your fancy or anything, we'll kind of dig into all the skill players, and kind of talk about where players have gone, circumstances they find themselves in, all those kind of good things. Brian Larkin, messy rookie running back questions. There are a lot of them, right? There are a lot of issues going on. I'll be happy to dig into that here momentarily. Again, we'll give a few people time to show up. Quarterbacks, very interesting. Hello, Timothy. Thanks for coming. Quarterbacks, very interesting. Running backs, yesterday in particular, obviously the day one situations were mind blowing. Yesterday, mind blowing. Pete Carroll, why do you hate us? Why, Pete? Hello, Dame. Thanks for coming. So yeah, plenty to chew through there. We'll talk about those. The Detroit, the Seattle, Atlanta. It will be Bijan over Algier. I'm guessing by a substantial margin, right? Like, I mean, it's probably too early to make some projections, but kind of sussing out some ballpark figures, expecting Robinson to get maybe double seems like a little too much, right? But maybe 250-ish to 125-ish seems about right. So pretty close to that range. I think Tyler Algier was talking to Matt Waldman last night. If you didn't listen to the radio program, hate Seattle. Yes, we'll get into it. But you kind of talked to Matt Waldman, and we were kind of discussing, Tyler Algier ran really well last year, and he was pretty impressive from a fantasy perspective, mainly because that offense could not throw the ball well, right? But also because that offensive line has come together, and they were really effective in opening holes for him. And so I guess for me, this is an ideal situation for Bijan Robinson. Not so much for Tyler Algier. If you're invested in dynasty, it's not going to be not going to be a great circumstance. And look, and you're listening to someone I have a roster where I think I have all three Los Angeles running backs not named Austin Eckler. So, I mean, this is how it goes sometimes. There's swings and misses. But Tyler Algier, if you remember going into last year, I remember something Michael Rothstein wrote for ESPN early on was, when we get to September, this guy might be cut or he might be the starting running back of the Falcons due to the circumstances, right? But that was the range was really wide because he is kind of just a guy, yet he was super effective. Bijan Robinson, not just a guy. Bijan Robinson's a hell of a player, right? So this is going to be this one's interesting to me. I think there's a reason he's going where he's going. If you're in the best ball rooms, like many of us here are early on, you're going to find him going as in the second, early third, second mostly. He's moved well inside the running back 10 range, right? And they talk about him being a generational talent. I'm not going to argue with that. I mean, it's hard to. We've seen what he can do. I don't know if the separation. I don't know that I felt the separation between him and Jahmyr Gibbs was as wide as it seemed to be talked about. Robinson last year ran for 1,580 yards, had 18 touchdowns, both well inside the top 10 in the country last year. Caught 60 balls over 3 seasons, so he can't catch the football. He's great at forcing missed tackles. I think he led the FBS in that with, I think, 91 last year. So there's a lot to like about Bijan Robinson in this circumstance, and there's, we'll see what we like about Jahmyr Gibbs in his circumstance. But for Bijan, again, I think, maybe doubling or close to doubling what we see. And then Cordero Patterson then goes back to gadget player territory, right? So, if you have sunk costs in him, you're getting him very late. If you're getting him as a running back 4 or 5, I could still live with that, right? I mean, I think, you're still going to get some touchdown upside in best ball, but in redraft there, it's going to be impossible to play players like that. And, so let's just so do like Bijan Robinson. Again, his current ADP, let me just verify this. I thought it was running back 8 when I looked yesterday. Let's see if the draft has changed. I'm going to just go through today, 29th. You would think a professional person would have done this before he came on his live stream. Oh, yeah. He's already up to number 5. So running back 5, currently in best ball 10s, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, B. John Robinson, Derrick Henry, who now has Tyjae Spears behind him, who some people really like, right? Matt Waldman, if you check out the rookie scouting portfolio, I highly recommend. Says the closest thing he's seen to Jamal Charles in his estimations. Kenneth Walker, Nick Chubb at 7, Kenneth Walker at 8, Josh Jacobs at 9, Najee Harris at 10. Travis Etienne got a little more backing to go with the Ernest Johnson and Tank Bigsby. So, we'll talk. I'll talk about Travis Etienne here for just a second because Mike Dempsey. Oh, Swift is like, so Andrea has the question here. Let's finish out this, Detroit-Seattle thing, and at least in Detroit, got through Atlanta. Let's finish out these running backs here because I do think it's interesting. Swift had dropped, but not as far as he should have, right? He's been going as running back 22, still going ahead of David Montgomery, who's been running back 25. All that gets blown out of the water, right? I mean, DeAndre Swift to me is essentially undraftable now. I don't know why you'd pick him unless you're playing, maybe the long game and hope that he lands somewhere. There's been talk that Miami has been interested. They've drafted now Devin Achane, so we'll see about that. But I think for me in best balls, I'm just going to dial back. I don't have any shares of him, so I will dial back even further and have even more no shares of him. Is that possible? Did I just do something mathematically improbable? I'm just not interested. And the Lions telegraphed this, not the Gibbs pick. And Gibbs at 12 overall, we can, discuss whether that was a great play, for them. But clearly the Lions are going with their draft board. They didn't care what everyone else thinks. They thought, in fact, there was Brad Holmes mentioned something where, they would have gone with Gibbs at 6, meaning they would have taken him ahead of Bijan. They rank him ahead of Bijan. He's faster. I don't know. Interesting. Jahmyr Gibbs is no bum, right? I mean, he averaged 6.6 yards per carry at Alabama, 4.36 speed in the 40 at 200 pounds. I mean, he's got a lot. There's a lot to like here. And him and David Montgomery, I will think will be the top of that. So let's kind of break that down just a little bit and look at what maybe kind of numbers we should expect for them. How the split might go. I mean, do we think it's reasonable to think Gibbs gets... So last year you looked at it, it was Jamal Williams had like the 260 range. Swift was, in and out due to injuries. Thinking Swift is going to get, more than 70 touches this year seems like a reach if he remains in Detroit. Or getting more than 100. If you, let's say with runs and catches, I don't think he hits 100 touches. David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs... They're going to split up maybe, I don't know. Are they going to split up that 260? Maybe 300 carries? Maybe split up 300 carries? This is going to be a tough one. I think we're going to be overpaying for both of them at this point without any certainty what the role is going to be. It's a great offensive line. And, and I like Gibbs. I just don't like the landing spot. And then we'll go to the Seattle, Walker or Charbonnet. I think it's going to be Walker. I mean, we've seen this. This is not new for Pete Carroll, right? I mean, I love Chris Carson, and along comes Rashad Penny. I thought Rashad Penny was great. Along comes Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker seems great. Along comes Zach Charbonnet, and all these guys were well-rounded players who are capable of handling a feature role. It just seems like the Seattle Seahawks are never going to be satisfied to have just one of those. Maybe they shouldn't be. I think most of us like to see these complementary pieces. I want pieces that fit together with each other. I don't want two of the same thing that do the same kind of roles and maybe do them equally well. That's not ideal because it's going to mean a kind of random split. Maybe the hot hand, the dreaded hot hand that we're after. Pete did take a sledgehammer. I talked about this on the radio if you were listening on Sirius yesterday. I've been on Sirius, I think, for like 12 years. I have sworn on the air once. One time I swore on air. It was Pete Carroll related. It was on a game day. I can't remember. He pulled some Pete Carroll-y, I believe, shizzle or some form of that was what I said on air. So here he is doing it again, the same shizzle. Good morning, Scampers. How are you? Great to see you. Good morning, Timothy. Thanks for coming. Hi, Troy Olson. How do you get your bald head to look so good? Well, first of all, it has to be perfectly symmetrically shaved. No. Head blade. Look into it, sir. Google it. Hit your Amazon. Headblade. That's the answer. Craig wants to know which day two running back got the best landing spot. By the way, we're heading into day 3, people. Don't think don't think there's nothing to see here. There are things to see here. Say Brock Purdy, say Isaiah Pacheco, 251st pick overall last year to Kansas City. Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. So yeah, I'll be watching today. I'll actually be on the air today from 4 to 7 p.m. We'll be back tomorrow. Mike Dempsey and I hosting the post-draft draft. We'll be back on Monday night. And also on today's show, we'll have John Lobb on. Will be joining us. If you missed last night, hit her on demand. I did a 1-hour wrap-up show. Did the full first night of coverage. You get all that on the SXM app if you don't have it. Go to the FootballDiehards.com website for more information on all the rookies and live draft coverage. We've got our draft tracker going. So check all that out. Use the promo code DieHards if you'd like a 15% discount. That's a great deal. You're welcome. So Swift and so back to Seattle. I'm sorry. Look, I felt really comfortable with Kenneth Walker in the middle of the second round up to this point. Now I don't, right? And so we'll see how it plays out. I mean, the early projections might be looking like, what did I kind of scratch something out here? I still see Walker getting the majority of the carries. 200 to 2 to 1, kind of a 2 to 1 ratio, I'm guessing. That's how I'm going to draft them for now until I get my final projections. These are not final projections as I'm throwing kind of ballpark figures out. These are kind of in the moment as I ponder the possibilities. And we'll dial them in and we'll have all that reflected in the rankings. This is as I'm trying to do my initial pass at the rankings. Kind of trying to find a range because all this is based on workload, right? And that's what we're doing with all the players that are coming into the draft. And this is what we've been waiting for. What is the opportunity? What is the scheme? Where are they going? How can they be used? What's in the way? And so now we have a really good idea. Now some of them, the rookies, are in the way. Say Kenneth Walker and David Montgomery and amongst others. So very interesting. A couple other questions here where we'll, and please throw them in. Also, throw in any comments of players that you thought went to really good spots or players you thought go to really horrible spots, players you think get put in really bad situations, as we've been discussing here. We'll be happy to hear your comments. Also, hit the like thing in the YouTube. Do the YouTube stuff. The like, the subscribe, the notifications, all that stuff. I love it. All right. Pete, I love this comment by Dave. Why did Pete take a sledgehammer to fantasy fun? Pete is horrible. Joining late, sorry, Dynasty Superflex 14 team Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, or Stroud. This is an interesting question, right? Because all three of them. So I guess a little more of this is about need. I talked about this on the radio the first night of the draft. So if you look at the NFL draft like you're buying scratch tickets, lottery tickets, right? You go into the store and you're looking at all the lottery tickets and you know that they might or might not come through, right? Do you buy the $500,000 ticket or do you buy the $1 million ticket? They're close to the same price. I don't know. I'm probably buying the $1 million ticket. I feel like Anthony Richardson's the $1 million ticket, but we all know the shortcomings. He's only been a 1-year starter, only completed less than 55% of his passes. But he's this athletic freak, as he called himself, an alien, right? An alien. And he is. He went 4.43 from the 40-yard dash for a guy who's nearly 250 pounds, 6'4". It's the fastest ever by a QB. He led the position vertical jump with 40.5 inches, broad jump at 10.9. It was, amazing physical specimen. And I think that's what people are drafting on. He goes to Indianapolis, where it's maybe a decent situation, right? Shane Steichen has some experience with, and Richardson mentioned this, is, the way he brought along Jalen Hurts, in Philadelphia as the offensive coordinator there. Also worked with Justin Herbert in Los Angeles. Before that, as a rookie, they took different approaches. The teams, when they had those quarterbacks, Justin Herbert, I think, had the most attempts in the league his rookie year, where the Eagles went run heavy. I think there's, so Steichen knows how to figure this out. And I think that works in Richardson's favor. But expecting a guy with 13 games of starting experience to come in and be a polished pro, he has 6 touchdown runs of 45 yards or more. You got to like that. So he's plenty capable. I think this is like not great news for Michael Pittman. I think this is pretty good news for Jonathan Taylor. Sounds like they need to build some offensive line depth further today, hopefully. But I do think if I'm playing the long game in a dynasty, in a Superflex dynasty, I'm going Richardson, right? Bryce Young and Stroud seem like safer plays to me. Bryce Young seems like a super safe play, although not everyone agrees. Not everyone's as keen on him. We know the drawback is size, right? He's 5'10". We've seen quarterbacks who are not 6 feet tall succeed before. Drew Brees would like a word with us about all that. So it's not impossible. I know others have not. Baker Mayfield, is he still a work in progress? I don't know. Am I being too generous there? But 36 college games. He had 27 starts. Young completed 65.8% of his passes, 8,356 yards, 80 touchdowns, and just 12 interceptions. They call him a fast processor. He's quick to move. You listen to the teammates that he played with, and obviously they have some bias towards him, right? They really like him, but they say nothing but glowing things about him. And in terms of they never saw him have a pass batted down. I'm sure it happened, but it's not like a regular occurrence like it has been with others. Sorry, Baker. No shade thrown here, just facts. And he goes into a situation though where it's an offense building from scratch, and they did add a piece, Jonathan Mingo, who's an interesting piece. Jeff Ratcliffe had an interesting thought on him. Say all the things we wanted Laviska Shenault to be. He's like the first draft of that thing, and Mingo is the polished thing you hand into the professor, the polished version of that same thing, that athletic freak player. So very interesting take there. So Jonathan Mingo joins that offense, but also all new pieces all around, right? Miles Sanders, who to me seems like he'll still be a pretty decent value going as a late, running back 2, right on the borderline running back 3, right in that range. I like that value. I think they're going to run the ball a lot. Hayden Hurst at tight end, Adam Thielen in there, DJ Chark. So a lot of new pieces to go with Terrace Marshall, who remains. And still people, are wondering if he will ever come through and be the thing. Yeah, we have a trade here. Oh, all right. Saints are on the clock. The draft hasn't started yet. Draft starts at the top of the hour. So we got that going for us. So anyway, so I think all three of those quarterbacks, CJ Stroud obviously has a lot going for him. You love the landing spot. Well, yes. I mean, obviously an instant opportunity for him. Stroud is the guy that looks like the prototypical guy of the three, 6'3", 6'4", 215 pounds, threw hit almost 70%, super accurate, like hit almost 70% of his passes. So you like that. 8,123 yards, just 12 interceptions. I want to say he threw 80 touchdowns. The college football playoff semifinal games against Georgia, he was amazing, put on a clinic there. At the 23 of 34 passing, 348 yards, 4 touchdowns, had another 34 yards rushing. So he has some ability to move well. So I like all those guys. I feel like, they both have super high ceilings. They're just going to take a little time to come along because their teams are works in progress, while Richardson is going to have some time. And maybe Richardson doesn't open as a starter. So we'll see. Mr. Scampers, Bryce Young will be the greatest quarterback of all time, as he keeps telling himself that. And that Jonathan Mingo is Randy Moss. I think all those things are within the range of possible outcomes. They might be closer to one end than the other. Maybe they're in the middle. I don't know. The Mingo part. I don't know. A couple questions. So there's where I'm at on those top quarterbacks. I think, kind of maybe your needs will dictate if you need someone who is going to be playing right away. Obviously, Young and Stroud fit that bill. They're coming in. By the way, Texans, I mean, coming into this draft, all the talk. The Texans, are they going to take a quarterback or are they going to take that edge rusher? One or the other. How about both? I like it. I'm not going to lie. Will Anderson Jr., the kind of the generational talent as he's viewed. I don't know. Tyree Wilson is pretty good too. Maybe has more upside, but the production in college and the level of play has been great for Anderson. So just a great move by the Texans, who catch a lot of heat for perfectly reasonable reasons, but a good move for them trying to get it fixed up. So there you go, Timothy King. Long answer to your short question. Dame overboard Addison to the Vikings is yes. This to me looks like the landing spot, right? And I talked a little about this to Matt Waldman as well last night. If you missed the post-game show, again, on the post-draft show last night on Sirius, you can get that on the SXM app. But you look at that run of wide receivers that went in the first round: Jackson Smith and Jigba at 20, Quentin Johnston at 21, Zay Flowers at 22, Jordan Addison at 23. Addison maybe gets the best landing spot, right? Goes into a Minnesota offense where, I've been investing some KJ Osborne shares. I'm not going to lie, because it's been really affordable, but knowing that they were probably going to be aiming for a wide receiver 2 here. Addison is it. Super good spot. I think Zay Flowers is in a good spot too, right? Or at least a better spot than Smith and Jigba. Maybe that's the thing. Comparably speaking, the 2 later guys got better landing spots to me than Smith and Jigba and Quentin Johnston, who needs to work on, catching the ball. I saw a comment. What was the comment in there on Quentin Johnston? Oh, someone wanted Addison to go to Los Angeles. I think it was. Dame wanted him to go to the Chargers. So he goes there. So maybe Quentin Johnston gets a chance to, maybe they move him inside, move Allen out to flanker, Williams. I've heard some people compare Quentin Johnston more to Mike Williams. Question, kind of catches the ball with his body. That seems to be a little bit of an issue there. Smith and Jigba seems super polished. I mean, didn't play a lot last year, so had the big hamstring issue. But he goes into an offense with 2 really established pieces. One of them, granted, is older, so that works in his favor. But seeing Smith and Jigba as like the slot guy or the 3 in this offense that's going to be run heavy, according to the draft of every year and Pete Carroll's preferred style of play. I don't know. Dwayne McFarland from My Fantasy Life, who, if you don't follow Dwayne on Twitter, you should. Dwayne at Dwayne DWAIN McFarland. He spells it odd, but he's a super smart dude. He tweeted about this. 12 first-round wide receivers since 2011 landed on teams with 2 established target earners, guys that have 18% target shares or more. 2 of those 12 reached 20% target shares as rookies. That was Kelvin Benjamin in 2014 and Jamar Chase in 2021. So it's, expecting these guys to come in. And I think in Addison's case, it's TJ Hawkinson and Jefferson. In Flowers' case, you're looking at, we'll see what Rashad Bateman is. Well, but I mean, Mark Andrews is in that equation as well. Quentin Johnston, the obvious pieces there that we mentioned, and same with Smith and Jigba. Some of the day 2 guys that went, I think, are, not as interesting. I know Jeff Mans on the broadcast loves Cedric Tillman as his top receiver. I don't think it's a great landing spot for him in Cleveland. Short term, I think long term it is. Mingo at Carolina seems like they were really interested. They invested heavily in him. Jaden Reed goes to Green Bay. Green Bay with the kitty core of receivers. We'll talk about that if you want. All young players. Everybody currently on their roster. Let's think about this. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Samori Torre, all, second-year players. Who's the depth there? Jeff Cotton and Bo Melton. But then you throw in Jaden Reed and then 2 tight ends and Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. So interesting. They're going with this youth movement across the board, apparently. So anyway, the question was, let's see. Next question was, I do like Addison a lot. Of that group, I like Addison. So I thought I saw a question here about the order I would take them from Dame. Let me find that and just kind of wrap that up. Is this the order that you should go? JSN, Addison, Quentin Johnston, Zay. I think probably in Dynasty, yes, for sure. In, redraft, I'd probably put Addison ahead. I'd probably go Addison, Flowers, JSN, and Johnston in redraft. But Dynasty, pretty much yes. Do I think Dalton Kincaid will be a top 10 tight end? So I guess the question for me was, did the Bills do what I hoped they would do to help Josh Allen? I don't know if they did. Matt Waldman thinks they did. Matt Waldman loves this pick. Like if you think that, Khalil Shakir truthers, I'm sorry for this, but there are a lot of people out there who think they need a really effective slot player, slot man. Cole Beasley moves on, retires, whatever, a non-factor. They need it, and so that we're going to see Dalton Kincaid essentially as a big slot, right? So, and if that's the case, if they use him like that, maybe so. Maybe he is. He does have, I think, borderline top 10. I mean, it drops Dalton Kincaid, Dawson knocks down 2 guys with similar damn names are going to be the end of me. Dalton and Dawson. But Dalton Kincaid should probably have a role. Matt Waldman thinks he'll be a great playmaker and be a huge contributor to this offense, and has top 10 upside this season in that role. And obviously Dawson Knox, I think, who was going at tight end 12 prior to this, is probably going to slip down into tight end 2 territory. I think that's a fair assessment. I saw this morning someone out there was throwing this out there. Let me see what they thought. See if they agreed with that. I like Sam Laporta. I don't mind his landing spot there, and I kind of, I have shares in him. I invested him in a dynasty draft before the draft. I think if you're looking at, where did I see the upside on Dalton Kincaid? I do think it's top 10, but it is going to drop Dawson Knox down. So there you go. Do you think, says Scott Kobe? Hi, Scott. So Anthony Richardson, I ran through. If you watched the replay, I went pretty in depth in it. Scott, I'm sorry if you missed it, but went pretty in depth in all that. So go catch the replay. I do it early on, but I love it. I think for the long haul, I don't know that it's great news for the short term. He's got 13 starts, right? Last guy I think we've seen with a similar number of starts was Mitchell Trubisky, and we saw how that went for him, right? But I think he'll be better. I think Anthony Richardson is a super high upside player. And I know Matt Waldman has talked about this, and I'll just maybe quote from the rookie scouting portfolio here if I have it open, and kind of because I thought he encapsulates it. But I mean, this is really, to me, if you're rolling the dice all along at that position, Richardson, inexperienced and raw may be synonymous, but they aren't exactly the same. The case of Richardson, there's a big difference. What he's lacking will come with more experience. What he has conceptually as a passer rarely comes with more experience or practice at this point, and that's before we broach his rare athletic ability. And I think that's what people see. He's super raw and he needs development. People point to that completion percentage, that 54.7%, and say that's horrible. Well, I can remember when Josh Allen couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. He got better. Not everyone does. I realize that, but I just think if you're playing for upside here, I thought kudos to the Colts for having the intestinal fortitude to go for the big play there, right? So interesting. So that's my take. But Scott listened earlier. I went into that as well. Do you think the Todd Monken offense could be beneficial for Zay and Odell Beckham? Could be beneficial for all involved, right? I mean, a change of pace might be great news for Lamar Jackson. By the way, Lamar Jackson re-signed. Imagine that. Who would have known? I've been pretty sure all along. Did I get down below 90%? Throw it in the chat if you remember. I've been pretty sure that all along that he would remain. My big concern was how long it took to get Lamar Jackson signed and into camp and happy. The talk is that, he saw what Jalen Hurts got and realized that was a dose of reality. The fact that there were no offers coming in, probably also another dose of reality. Probably also Emil Kadlick mentioned this, the draft coming. Maybe they were, some signals that they were going to draft a quarterback. Heard someone talk about Stetson Bennett, not as a starter, but since he knows Monken's offense from Georgia. But I do think this is a really good offense. It's been super productive. And so I'm kind of enthusiastic about it. I also like the fact that in Georgia, they went heavy with the 11 personnel, the 2 tight end sets, which fits into the talent on hand, in Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. So I think there's a lot to like there, and I don't think it's not bad news for Zay and Odell Beckham, and maybe for Rashad Bateman. Maybe they throw a little more. They're going to run the ball a hell of a lot, though. Scott Kobe, all in for the Samari Torre breakout. Hopefully. Good morning, JR1616. You didn't get the memo? Wait. Hi, Albert. How are you? Timothy, since the Cowboys have not yet drafted a running back, what do you think happens to the future of Pollard, i.e. 2025 and beyond? I think the Cowboys will probably get a running back today. By the way, I think I saw another question from you, Timothy, that I maybe missed. Let me scroll back up. Oh, yeah, the Mozzie Smith draft. The Cowboys are, it hasn't had a ton of attention for me. I know they added the tight end, and that's great news, but I think it's not like a super high-end player, kind of the player I expected, Luke Schoonmaker. I don't know what to make of this. It looks like it's going to be a 3-way split to me, right? Jake Ferguson. I think this is probably great news for Jake Ferguson, and not horrible news for Peyton Hendershot. I think they're all going to get a play. So I don't know. I haven't been excited about it because they don't have a frontline play. I'm not excited when interior defensive linemen go early in the draft. I'm sorry. I'm not Jalen Carter either. I don't care. I mean, I'm in some IDP leagues, so I care a little bit, but just from overall perspective, I want the exciting plays, and those aren't exciting plays. So they have not drafted a running back. So let's just take a quick look at best available, and kind of set the table here as we're a half hour away from the kickoff of the draft. Quarterback, Jake Haener, Jaron Hall, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, are the players you're going to hear a lot of talk about. I know on the radio broadcast last night, Clayton Tune got some love. Tyson Bagent that's a guy that Matt Waldman likes a little bit. So there are a handful of guys at quarterback. The running backs, though, are the players that are really interesting to us here. I think there's still some really good ones left for some guys with some really, really good potential. And again, I mentioned, at quarterback, Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant last year. Jake Haener often kind of compared. So, funny things happen at running back. I mentioned, there's guys that go late in drafts who are pretty good at day 3 picks. Elijah Mitchell, Isaiah Pacheco come immediately to mind. Roshan Johnson from Texas. Bijan Robinson's backup is still available. Izzy Abanikanda, I can speak. I think Dwayne McBride is a guy that I've heard will catch a little buzz. Chase Brown, Zach Evans, Deuce Vaughn. Sean Tucker is still out there. There's a handful of guys, Evan Hull. So it'll be interesting. Tyon Evans is a guy that some people like a little bit, I know. So wide receiver is still available. A.T. Perry comes to mind. Xavier Hutchinson, who I have drafted some in some early dynasty drafts, hoping he comes through. Trey Palmer still available. I know John Laub put out a list of guys that he was watching, and I think Trey Palmer was on his list for sure. So let me just double check that. See who Laub has. Yeah, Roshan Johnson. He likes Izzy Abanikanda, Xavier Hutchinson. Charlie Jones also was another one on his list along with Trey Palmer. So plenty to see today. Plenty of excitement. So I don't think I haven't given up on the Cowboys, but the notion on Palmer going forward or Pollard going forward, boy, it's the 1-year deal. I think a lot's going to depend on how he does, but I just think the early draft capital expended on Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, I don't think is an indication of a trend where teams are going to be paying up for running backs going forward. I just don't see it. So a lot of that's going to depend on what Tony Pollard wants and how he produces. We know the Cowboys don't view him as an every down back. They talked about it last year. They think he's most effective with a limited number of snaps. At the time, it was 30. Maybe it's more. But they're still like Roshan Johnson might be a great fit for that offense, right? A kind of a thunder to Pollard's lightning. So we'll see what they do. But honestly, I feel like running backs for me, Timothy, just thinking of long-term futures for running backs is not a business I want to be in because I don't think they have long-term futures. There's another bus leaving the station every day, right? And I just, no offense to them. I think they're great players and I love them. I've been playing fantasy football since 1986. Teams were built on that. And yes, Rojo, question Dallas related, is Rojo Ronald Jones worth rostering? I don't know. I mean, I've avoided him in best balls. Every time I get to that range where he is, I think, man, maybe he ends up being the goal line guy. And I just can't bring myself to pull the trigger. So Anthony, Craig Schmucker, I think this is an Anthony Richardson related post. Helps that Nagy won't be coaching him. Yes. And I mentioned that. Again, go back. If you missed my initial discussion, part of that was about Shane Steichen's history developing young quarterbacks, Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts. So yes, there's something to that. Albert wants to know if Kenneth Walker is the biggest loser. Probably, relatively speaking, the players we're more interested in. I'm way more interested in him. DeAndre Swift's the big loser. I don't know that he has a job, really. I think he'll get traded somewhere, but I don't know that he has a job, if he stays in Detroit. Kenneth Walker still has a job, and he's probably still the lead back. Again, I mentioned earlier on, I think, a 2-to-1 ratio doesn't seem out of bounds for an initial expectation, at least, for Kenneth Walker's workload, 2-to-1 over Charbonnet, and then stay healthy. Brian Larkin thinks it'll be Sean Tucker going to the Cowboys. He is possible as well. He fits that mold too. So there's still a lot of running backs, and Brett Veach, talked about it and proved it last year. There are 1,000-yard rushers go in the 7th round of the draft, right? It happens. So totally true. JR16, Hooker or Goff in Dynasty? I say Goff. It's close, right? I think Goff is playing well. And I don't know that I expect him to have a drop off, right? So that being the case, yes, for me it's Goff. I mean, if at some point, the money becomes an issue or his performance is the slightest issue, this is a great landing spot. Let's put it this way. This is a great landing spot for Hendon Hooker, right? He's not, if there were questions about Hendon Hooker, it wasn't his ability, right? He throws the ball well. He's athletic, runs the ball well, does all these great things. I think it's 24 games. He had 22 starts in Tennessee after transferring there. He completed almost 69% of his passes, 6,000 yards, 58 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. And this is in a unique offense, though. And I think that's the knock against him. By the way, he also ran for 1,000 yards and 10 more scores during that span. He's big. He's athletic. I love everything about Hendon Hooker coming off the ACL, so this gives him the year to do that. But also, it's that weird offense. He's in a weird offense, Tennessee's offense. I think that's reflected in the draft capital expended on him and teammates, right? Jalen Hyatt as well. So, and I think that's what Will Levis. I mean, if whatever jerkiness he has or whatever it was, the toe, whatever it was that drove his price down. At least he's played a couple of years in a true pro-style offense and kind of a Shanahan-McVay-style offense with Liam Cohen and Rich Scangarello coaching him there. And, he's fairly productive, has a big arm, so there's a lot to like about both those guys. But I think a Dynasty, it depends on what time, I guess, what time horizon you're looking at. If it's 5 years out, yeah, Hendon Hooker over Goff. If it's within that window, I still think it's Goff. But we'll know more. And like this year for sure, Goff, and I think another year of Goff is where I'm at. Could Dallas entertain signing Zeke back at a veteran minimum at any chance? I think they would probably entertain that. I don't know if Zeke would, but yes, I'm guessing he will. I'm guessing, they've talked about it. They haven't shut the door to that. But Zeke is saying very little. DTR, Dorian Thomas Robinson to be Stafford's understudy. That'd be great. I talk about the league I'm in, Scott Barrett's league, where we draft before the draft. I always grab a quarterback late, and last year it was Skylar Thompson who actually hit the field. This year, it is DTR, the UCLA quarterback, and I think I would love that, James. So I'm sitting here trying to downplay the possibility of it because I don't want to ruin my karmic payback here. I put a bet in on Denver selecting wide receiver as their first pick and made a nice chunk of change. Thoughts on what Denver did. So I think Mims is a pretty good pick, right? Marvin Mims comes in there. They didn't overspend on him. I mean, 63rd pick overall. He can come in as the number 4 guy, and maybe there's opportunity there, Scott, if they make a move, right? And that's the thing. I mean, if we have all the pieces remain in place this year, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Jerry, I didn't mean to leave Jerry Jeudy off. Jeudy, Sutton, and Patrick. Sutton, this may be kind of his last-ish year on his contract, so maybe there's room next year. I think for this year, Mims, you look at him as like a tail end of your roster or a wide receiver 6 guy that if the circumstances dictate, maybe he could move into the rotation a little bit. But definitely a dynasty buy and hold for sure. Swift has to be traded, you would think. Yes, I do think that. Watson Manders should be loving Cleveland grabbing Cedric Tillman. A lot of conversation. Last night on the radio about Cedric Tillman. Jeff Mans has Cedric Tillman as his number 1 wide receiver in this entire class, right? So he was really enthusiastic about him. He was less so about Tillman in general this year in Cleveland, but I do think, I agree with this, the longer term, I think Tillman will be a riser, and it is good news for Watson managers. Scamper shocked that the Giants took Hyatt over him. I don't know if I was shocked, but a little surprised. I guess, Mans had been talking him up all night, so I guess that was a little surprising. Jalen Hyatt went 73 overall, Tillman 74 overall. Josh Downs, too, going at 79 was a pretty nice buy. And I know John Hansen was super high on Michael Wilson, who went to the Cardinals, I think, at 94. So where would be the best landing spot for Swift if he was traded? I think, Miami is the team that's been looking into him. But you look at the teams that kind of have, question marks at running back or maybe uncertain situations, and I don't know how uncertain they really are, but in our mind they are. The Minnesota Vikings with Dalvin Cook, what's going to happen with him? What's going to happen with Joe Mixon in Cincinnati? Cincinnati still has some room for somebody who can come in and be a compliment to Mixon even if he stays. I think Minnesota less so because they'd have a hell of a lot of money invested in the running back position if all those guys, if Cook and Alexander Mattison are there. But if they could move on from Cook, DeAndre Swift would be a good compliment to Alexander Mattison, I think. So for me, Swift, I don't know if I'm not at Lions level lack of trust with DeAndre Swift, but my lack of trust is pretty low. Would like to see him get a new landing spot and go somewhere where he can, make an impact. But I don't know that we're going to see that, honestly. Philadelphia, could they be in play? Thank you, Timothy. I appreciate you coming. By the way, everybody, I will be on the radio later today. I think the draft coverage starts at noon with Fabiano, Ratcliffe, and Lindsey Rhodes. They'll do 4 hours, and then I jump on with Dempsey 4 to 7. We'll be on Eastern time. John Lobb will be with us the last hour to give some of his thoughts if y'all love what Lobb has to say. Also, I'm sure Lobb will have some post-draft content up on the site pretty soon, taking into account landing spots, etc. Then tomorrow or Sunday, we'll host the post-draft draft on the Sirius channel. Dempsey and myself, all the hosts. And I don't have to draft in this one, so I can actually make pertinent comments instead of sitting there trying to struggle and do more things than I can capable of doing. I'm quite old and easily confused. So, as you well know. And then Monday night, special wrap-up kind of show. We're going to talk a lot of Dynasty on that show. Monday night, 10 to midnight. And then Wednesday, we'll carry that over next week and talk a lot more Dynasty. Rashee Rice going to rise up the boards, or did we learn from Sky Moore? I hope we learn from Sky Moore. But yes, Rashee Rice is going to rise up the boards. We've learned nothing, right? We don't care. It's that opportunity of somebody playing with Patrick Mahomes, and like I'm not real keen on Rashee Rice. I don't have high expectations for him. Is he Mecole Hardman too? Maybe Mecole Hardman too. To his credit, Mecole Hardman was coming on a little bit, right? So I don't want to be like a total downer here. But I think Rice is probably, every wide receiver who comes in there's problem is the same problem. His name is Travis Kelce, right? I mean, just, getting around Travis Kelce is the lead option in this offense is just not true. I know Matt Waldman thinks here's what Waldman says, promising flanker with a lot of technical skills that aren't quite where they need to be yet. So he's kind of developmental. If he can refine them, he'll be a starting flanker in the NFL. And that's the key. I mean, he's not a finished product. He has worked a little bit with Mahomes, so you got to like that. But no, we probably have not learned, Dame, from, and by we, I mean the general public has probably not learned. People will be taking flyers. For me, I'm going to take flyers on, and I consider them flyers on Kadarius Toney, not because of talent, because of availability. It's just, it's been a struggle for him. But, I'm a little bit injury agnostic, and I'm hoping for the best. So I'm going to take my shares. I'm going to take reasonably priced shares of Kadarius Toney, and after that, it's like late round flyer. Hi, James. Late round flyers. I think this is not great news for Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He didn't do anything, but I still feel like any of those guys who's playing with Patrick Mahomes, you're drafting them essentially as free square plays because they play with Patrick Mahomes. No other reason. Zero other reason. We all know what the role is going to be, right? And let's just look at the current ADPs on some of these guys. Kadarius Toney going as wide receiver 43. It's the first Kansas City receiver off the board, playing with Patrick Mahomes in a super explosive offense, right? 43. Wide receiver 43. Next up, Sky Moore, 54. Next up, MVS, 73. Wide receiver 73. Free. Richie James, free. Wide receiver 80. And Rashee Rice has been going outside, in the 100. He'll rise up. If he rises up above Marquez Valdez-Scantling, is he still a value? Probably still. They're all free square plays. So I'll take chances, but I'm not excited. Because why should we be? Kansas City keeps telling us. Dame's question is the answer. The way her question is phrased, the answer. No, we did not learn from Sky Moore because we don't care. Everybody who plays with Patrick Mahomes has that opportunity for something. But don't overpay. You know that. What are my thoughts on the Raiders draft? Did I hear correctly? Tyree Wilson may not play this year. I did not hear that Tyree Wilson may not play this year. I did not hear that. Let me take. I did not hear that, Scott. Where did you hear that? Now I have to get on my Google device. I'm not seeing that just off the top of my head. So I don't know. I'm not sure. Now I have to look. I'm all excited. That'd be horrifying. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything on that, Scott. Let me know where you saw that. I think Tyree Wilson's a great player, and I think he has huge upside. They needed the pass rush ability. Michael Mayer, I think, was a bit of a value. We talked about this a little bit, and Trey Tucker, I mean, he's a nice slot guy. We talked about this a little bit, right? So the last week or two kind of mentioned, the depth of talent at tight end. And all right, Scott thinks he heard that on NFL radio. I've not heard that he won't play this year, but not saying it's not true, just haven't heard it. And honestly, not following the defensive players that much, although he is certainly a high-profile play. And you wonder if the Raiders would have invested that pick in him if they known this. Anyway, so I think in general, the tight end position, the wide receiver position, the running back position, the running backs did have the super high-end guys, Robinson and Gibbs. But then that next tier, there's just a wide swath of guys in a similar range. And why would you not wait for guys like that? And I think the same thing happened to tight end. If you remember when Lau was on here and we did a tight end stream one day, there's like 15 guys that were draftable. Well, that's going to push the price of all of them down, right? And we saw it. Dalton Kincaid, who people thought was going to go inside the top 15 when 25. And the other guys we thought would go in the first round slid out of the first round easily, right? And Michael Mayer was one of those. And so I guess for me, it's a good landing spot, right? And in terms of opportunity, the pieces there versus, I mean, I don't know. Austin Hooper doesn't, thrill anybody, right? I mean, he's been okay, but he hasn't been high end for a little while. So it seems like a good landing spot. Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft both going to Green Bay. They kind of knocked themselves out. Oh, he has a foot injury at the end of the season last year in college. Yes, he did have that, but I didn't know that was. I didn't think anyone was worried about that, Scott. I didn't know that it was a worry that he was not going to play this year. I mean, I'm checking. Let's check some of the. Fractured foot last November. Medical staffs and leagues will have so yeah. I haven't seen anyone talk about him not playing. I've seen people talk about the injury, but not about him not playing. So, I mean, we'll just let that go. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I don't really care. Beyond that, I mean, it's the Raiders. I'm more interested in the skill players, and Michael Mayer has, obviously worried about if they get a great pass rusher. Going up against some of the quarterbacks that I love in that division. So that's obviously a concern. But beyond that, I hope they finally found a really good edge rusher to work off some Max Crosby. Let's see. But yeah, Michael Mayer, I think all those tight ends kind of fell down a little bit because there are a bunch of them, right? And it's just, why pay up if you had all these guys in a similar range? And you didn't have to pay up for them. Why not wait? So it makes sense that they all kind of got depressed. The value of all of them got depressed. Same with the wide receivers. That next range of guys once you got past that top tier. And I mean, look, we thought some of those guys were going to go earlier. We thought Smith and Jigba was going to go earlier than he did. I think we all kind of assumed that Johnston, Flowers, and Addison were probably first round capable, but we didn't know where. We didn't know they were all going to go off 4 straight picks. Right. And I think after that big group after that, and I think Bingo went earlier than most people thought, but Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice, Marvin Mims, Tank Dell. Well, I don't think I knew Tank Dell was going to go off there. Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, Josh Downs, Michael Wilson. I mean, that whole group there. I mean, there's a lot of similar guys, and there are still some guys in that similar range. What starts in minutes? What are we? About 11 minutes away from the start of the draft. Got any more questions? Throw them in here. I'll try and wrap up that so we can get you out of here for the draft. But that group of tight ends, Laporta, Meyer, Musgrave, and I like the Laporta. I like that landing spot for him. But I don't trust Brock Wright and Shane Zylstra to not be touchdown vultures for sure. But Musgrave and Tucker Kraft going to Green Bay. I mean, there's opportunity there. Schoonmaker, I'm not like that. Brenton Strange, strange pick. Darnell Washington, sounds like there were medical issues for him. There's been a lot of discussion about that. So So I don't know. I think that's why some of these guys are going later. So I guess the whole premise of that, the whole point of that entire gobbledygook there was don't get too upset if players' prices got depressed on draft day. I don't think that reflects their ability. I think it, or the team's interest in them. I just think it reflects the economics of the draft, or there were positions of the teams valued more higher because there was maybe a little more scarcity at the higher end, and there's just a bunch of guys at a similar range. So that's kind of how I talked about this with a number of the guests in the weeks leading up to the draft to get their thoughts, and they kind of all agreed that maybe even like the wide receiver class, it's not viewed as like a great class this year, but maybe it's better than we think just because they're all kind of a similar level, and maybe they'll all be relatively productive given their draft costs. So that's what we're hoping for here. A few more minutes for questions before we get into the draft. I'm sure all of you will be wanting to go watch that. Like I'm going to go watch that and have a good time. Again, if you missed out, I'll be on the radio today from 4 to 6 on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports from 4 to 7. It's a 3-hour show. I only wish it was 2 hours. 4 to 7 with Mike Dempsey. John Law will join us the last hour to talk some of these rookie landing spots, some of the things. We'll find out about Tyree Wilson too. I'm still looking for that, Scott. I don't know. It bugs me when I don't know news. I just don't see anyone saying, because 5 seconds ready for me. I think that would be a huge headline if he wasn't going to play. So just don't see it. Anyway, James Furry may have missed it, but this Charbonnet going to Seattle hurt Kenneth Walker's value. It depresses his price for sure. I mean, you're going to get a better deal on him, and for the reason, for the obvious reason, the concern is that Charbonnet will cut into his workload. I think he will. I kind of mentioned this. I think like a 2-to-1 ratio seems like, the default position until we have more information. And I go with that. Ebbs and flows, runs and droughts, such as draft day. That's kind of the thing, right? It's like, when we sit here, and Mr. Scampers makes this great point. When you sit here, like Will Levis, if Will Levis, once he made it out of the first half or the first 10 picks, he probably wasn't going to go. Nobody needed a quarterback that bad unless somebody wanted to jump up. And that was maybe a little bit of a surprise there, I'm sure, for him and his guests at the draft. I thought maybe someone would trade up into the bottom end, somebody that wanted him, like maybe Tennessee would trade up and grab him so they get him on the 5th year, have the 5th year option available to him. But they didn't. But that's the thing, it's such a great point because, the teams are looking at the big picture, the overall values on the board. And if they have a bunch of guys graded similarly at one position and a small handful of guys graded at the same spot, I mean, the economics of it tell you take the more scarce position, right? So that doesn't surprise me. And by the way, Tennessee said they would have drafted Levis at 11 or earlier if Skoronski, or 11 if Peter Skoronski, the offensive tackle, and that's a perfect example of that. There's an offensive lineman they had valued higher, and they took him there, and then boom, he fell out of that range. So that's the thing about the draft. And if you're sitting there again wondering, well, what does it matter? What does today matter? There's a lot of great players that have gone on day 3 of the draft, and just last year I pointed out the 2 prime examples, Brock Purdy and Isaiah Pacheco. Is that the norm? No, but is it possible? Absolutely possible. Happens, many players come out of nowhere to have successful NFL careers and come out of day 3 of the draft. So excited to see some of the players left again. If you're wondering who you're looking for today, I think the running backs for sure. Roschon Johnson is a guy that I'm kind of keen on. I think Izzy Abanikanda, the Pittsburgh running back, is going to be. I know Jeff Mans was probably really disappointed that he did not go with one of those 2 compensatory picks San Francisco had. One of them was a kicker too, by the way. Dwayne McBride, I know people are high on as well. Chase Brown, Zach Evans, Deuce Vaughn. Who else is in there? Sean Tucker. I keep leaving Sean Tucker off my list for some unknown reason. So a lot of great, running back is a position. Stetson Bennett to the Raiders. Why not, right? I mean, Stetson Bennett, talk about a really polarizing, player. Like, is it all the off-field stuff? I mean, he was pretty productive at college. It's interesting. What does it take on Kirk Cousins if you see Minnesota addressing the quarterback position today? I think they probably will today. I don't know if that's, the long-term answer. Maybe there's just kind of, getting someone in the building and see if they develop. But I do think that they will. And I don't see a long-term future in Minnesota for Cousins, but they have to find the next answer. They've talked about it. They talked about it, I think last month. They wanted to have the next guy in the building. Maybe they see the next guy. It'll be interesting to see. It's worth watching who they draft. My watch is telling me there are trades. Third trade before round 4. Unprecedented is what it's being claimed to me in my devices. Eagles now are 105. No one's picked, but now so Saints, Raiders, then Eagles with the first 3 picks. So we've had a number of trades already to get them. Maybe we'll have another one of those crazy days of trading. All right, everybody. If you have any more questions, throw them in. We'll take you right up to the top of the hour, get you ready for the draft, and all enthusiastic and excited. That's why the Raiders seem like the fit, right? I agree with that. I mean, he just, I know, who is it? Do I want to say Waldman maybe likes him a little better? I mean, it just seems like, the off-field issues are off-field issues. I mean, at some point, according to Jalen Carter, nobody cares. At some point when you get to the off-field issues. Waldman has Bennett ahead of guys like Hall, Toon, has him ahead of Hendon Hooker, by the way, and Dorian Thompson Robinson. And ahead of Levis. He's not a big Levis fan. But Stetson Bennett, he says, would not be shocked if he winds up one of the 3 or 4 best options from this class, but definitely not, safer. He's underrated. He projects him as a quality journeyman starter with an underrated arm, quickness, and vertical accuracy. That's interesting. DeAndre Hopkins front. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Right, it's like 2 of me. What's going on with that? Let's see. Do you think DeAndre Hopkins front, and do you see a trade coming soon? Amadi Ossenfort says he doesn't think he's going to move. I think maybe he will, but we'll have to see. I mean, this seems like a great trade today. Thanks for coming, Andrea. Appreciate you showing up. Appreciate everyone showing up as always. Always have a great time going through things, chopping it up with you. Appreciate your questions, your comments, and etc. And I'll be back here on Wednesday as well for more of this continuing discussion. I'll probably find a guest to come on and we'll run through some stuff, take your questions as well. And then next weekend, we'll be back to the usual time. Started an hour earlier today. Maybe that's why you missed it, JR, because we started an hour earlier to miss the start of the draft. So, yeah, the DeAndre. So the players I'm watching today, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know if we wouldn't have seen something happen if it was going to happen already, but maybe not. Are we ignoring long-term uncertainty on Seattle quarterback situations? Yes, I think we are. I think totally we are for both those players, Seattle and Minnesota. I don't know if obviously Seattle, Geno Smith is not the long-term answer. It's not they didn't invest in him as a long-term guy. Next year, next 2 years. So there's a lot of thought that they would go quarterback early in this draft. They did not. Minnesota. I think it is a big concern for Justin Jefferson and Addison. And it's going to be an important plan. And maybe we don't know this answer until next year. And maybe Cousins is a longer-term answer for us than we realize. I'd like that answer. I'd like that. I mean, look, I think Kirk Cousins is just fine, says Justin Jefferson up to this point. Maybe not fine for Minnesota, but fine for us. Next week, we will be back to noon, James Furry. Be back to normal time. It'll be 7 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, noon next Saturday. So we'll see you there. I appreciate, again, everyone coming. I'll get you out of here. Let's go watch the draft. Have a great time. Catch me on Sirius today at 4 to 7 p.m. Tomorrow, 5 to 7. Monday night, 10 to midnight. John Lobb on with me and Dempsey for a little while today. And Dempsey and I will go through all this information and kind of plumb the depths a little further and cover all the picks that are made today of interest. So we'll talk to you after that. See you Wednesday. Thanks again for coming. Oh, John Miller, quick question. In a dynasty rebuild, is it worth moving away from Kyler for draft picks? Is he worth the first round in a rookie draft? I'd probably hang on to Kyler. I would probably hang on to Kyler. You know what you have there, right? I mean, first round picks, again, I talked a little bit about this like a lottery. I mean, some of them pan out. I mean, maybe it depends on which first round pick. Like if it's a super early pick, maybe so. But generally speaking, John, I'm probably sticking with Kyler over the longer term. Thanks, Mr. Scampers. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you Wednesday night or catch you on the radio before then. Go to football.